This is Booked for Drama, where stories burn, hearts break, the tea is always hot and never a part 2. Today we're diving into To Unlove You. Let's go! Chapter 1. The living room sparkled with a warm, inviting glow from 28 candles on Jonathan's cake. Laura, who was trying to hide her nerves, fussed over the final details with Jonathan's family. She'd poured her heart into this surprise. Every detail, from the chocolate cake he loved to the decorations that matched his laid-back style. Tonight was supposed to be special, a chance to show Jonathan how much he meant to her. "Everything looks amazing," Jonathan's sister said, giving Laura a reassuring smile. "He's going to love it." Laura forced a smile with her racing heart. She had been looking forward to this night for weeks, hoping it would set the stage for what she planned to say after the party. "Relax," his sister nudged her gently. "He's gonna love it. You know he will." Laura nodded, swallowing the knot in her throat. It wasn't about whether Jonathan would love the party. He always appreciated her efforts, he always appreciated her. But the thought of finally confessing her feelings made her palms sweat, but she was determined to make tonight perfect. Then, the sound of a car door closing outside jolted everyone into action. The lights were already dimmed, and the room was filled with anticipation. "He's here," someone whispered. Laura took a step back, positioning herself behind his family, letting them take the front line. Her heart raced as the door creaked open. Surprise! The room exploded with noise, laughter, and smiles. Jonathan stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes wide before breaking into that familiar, lopsided grin. "No way," he said, running a hand through his tousled hair. "You guys didn't." His grin widened, and he stepped further inside. His gaze quickly found Laura, who was hiding behind his sister. "You did all this?" he asked, clearly touched. His smile softened, and for a moment, his eyes lingered on her with an emotion she couldn't quite place. Laura shrugged, trying to sound casual as she stepped forward. "Your sister helped. I just did what I do best, throwing a party." "Wow, this is incredible," Jonathan said, giving her a quick hug. His touch was familiar, comforting, but it stirred different emotions in Laura. "Seriously, thank you. It means a lot." "No problem," Laura replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're the one who always makes birthdays special. I'm just returning the favor." Jonathan laughed as the sound filled the room with its usual warmth. "I don't know how you do it. You're always on top of things. How do you manage to remember all my favorite things?" "It's a talent," she joked, nudging him playfully. "Or maybe I'm just a little obsessed with making sure you're happy." "You've definitely got a knack for it," he said, grinning. "I'm lucky to have you in my life." Laura hummed at his words, but the conversation suddenly shifted as Jonathan's family pulled him toward the cake and presents. Laura watched him interact with everyone, the same Jonathan she'd known since childhood, effortlessly charming and always the life of the party. But tonight, it felt bittersweet. She was here, putting on a brave face, planning to tell him how she really felt. She stayed on the edges of the festivities, chatting with his family and trying to ignore the way Jonathan's jokes and laughter tugged at her heart. The distance between them seemed to grow with each passing minute, and the weight of what she had to say felt heavier. As the evening wore on and the room began to settle, Jonathan found her again, leaning casually against the wall. The playful tone in his voice was replaced by a more genuine warmth. "Hey, birthday cake thief," he said as a grin tugged at his lips. "Did you finally get a chance to snag a piece for yourself?" Laura chuckled softly. "Not yet. I've been too busy playing hostess." "Of course you have," Jonathan teased. "You're always making sure everyone else is taken care of first. I swear, you're like a birthday fairy." She laughed with her heart aching a little. "Just trying to make sure you have a good time." Jonathan's smile faded slightly, as if he wanted to say more, but the thumping bass of the music from the speakers drowned out his thoughts. He glanced around, visibly frustrated with the noise. Laura noticed the shift, and her heart fluttered in her chest. She, too, had a lot she wanted to say, but this wasn't the right place. Confessing her feelings here, amidst the music, the crowd, and his family, felt too awkward and too risky. She bit her lip and decided that now was her chance to take him outside, away from the noise, where they could finally talk in peace. "Hey," she said, stepping closer and raising her voice over the music, "do you want to?" But before she could finish, Jonathan's phone buzzed loudly in his pocket. He glanced down at it, his brows lifting for a split second before a grin flashed across his face. "Hold on a sec," he said, already stepping back as he answered the call. Laura's stomach sank. It was the smile he gave whenever one of his flings called. She could hear the familiar playful tone in his voice as he greeted whoever was on the other end, likely one of his random girlfriends, someone who caught his eye this week. The sound of her own heartbeat suddenly felt louder than the music as Jonathan raised a finger, silently telling her to wait, and walked away, phone pressed to his ear. She stood there, frozen, watching as he strode toward the corner of the room, his attention fully consumed by the conversation. Any hope of getting him alone, of telling him how she really felt, dissolved like a fading spark. The confidence she'd been building all night crumbled in the face of that simple, careless gesture. He didn't choose her, not now, not in this moment. He chose the random girl on the other end of the line. Laura's shoulders slumped, her hand falling back to her side. What was she even doing? How could she compete with the steady parade of girls who came and went in Jonathan's life? He'd never seen her that way, just his best friend, the girl who organized his birthday parties and laughed at his goofy jokes. She'd always been right in front of him, but somehow, it was never enough. Suddenly, the party felt too loud, too crowded. She felt out of place in a moment that should have been hers. With a deep sigh, she moved toward the back, slipping out the door into the cool night air. Chapter 2. Jonathan stood in the hallway, his back leaning against the wall as he wrapped up the conversation with his latest fling, a girl he'd only met a few weeks ago. She had a way of keeping his attention for now, but it wasn't anything serious. He chuckled at something she said while his voice dropped into a flirtatious tone. "Yeah, I'll see you soon." "No, not tonight. It's my birthday party, after all," Jonathan said, glancing at the door that led back into the party. He heard the music pulsing through the walls and gave a lazy smile. "But, we'll hang out soon, all right?" After a few more words were exchanged, he ended the call and slid his phone into his pocket. He lingered there for a moment and ran a hand through his hair, not really thinking much of the conversation. It was just another call, just another girl. But then his thoughts shifted back to Laura. She had seemed a bit off earlier, quieter than usual, like she had something on her mind. He remembered the way she tried to say something before the call interrupted them. Guilt pricked at him briefly. Maybe he'd left her hanging a little too long. With a shrug, Jonathan pushed open the door and walked back into the party. The lively buzz of conversations and the low hum of music greeted him once more. He scanned the room, looking for Laura among the familiar faces of friends and family. But she was nowhere to be found. He frowned slightly and moved through the crowd, greeting people absent-mindedly as he made his way toward his sister. He finally spotted her near the snack table, laughing with some friends. "Tabby," Jonathan called, weaving his way through the group. Tabitha looked up, a smile on her face as she saw him approach. "Hey, birthday boy, finished flirting already?" Jonathan rolled his eyes. "Very funny. Have you seen Laura?" Tabitha raised an eyebrow. "She was just with you, wasn't she?" "Yeah, but I got a call and when I came back, she wasn't there." "I can't find her," Jonathan said, glancing around again while his frown deepened. Tabitha's teasing smirk faded as she shrugged. "I haven't seen her in a bit. She might have stepped outside for some air. It's been pretty loud here." Jonathan nodded, feeling a strange knot form in his chest. "Yeah, maybe. I'll check outside." As he turned to leave, Tabitha called after him. "She seemed kind of quiet tonight, didn't she?" "I thought she was gonna say something important." Jonathan paused for a second as her words hit him with a little more weight than he expected. "Something important? What did Laura want to talk about?" With a quick nod to his sister, Jonathan headed toward the back door with a strange feeling stirring inside him, like he'd missed something. He stepped outside, expecting to see Laura, but the backyard was empty. No one was there, not even a trace of her. The cool night air felt unsettlingly still. He scanned the area, confused. Wait, did she go home? He wondered, glancing over the fence toward the house next door. Laura's parents lived just beside his own family's place, and she'd been staying there ever since they graduated college. Jonathan knew she was supposed to take over the family business one day, but it still felt strange seeing her back there after all this time. Their families had been close for years, practically intertwined. Growing up, he and Laura were inseparable, always running back and forth between the two houses. They shared everything: birthdays, holidays, even family dinners. It was no surprise they'd ended up best friends. But even best friends drifted sometimes. And tonight, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something between them was different. He hadn't noticed it before, but thinking back, Laura had been a little distant lately, like she had something on her mind she wasn't sharing. And now, she was gone, just disappeared from his birthday party without a word. He wondered if she was upset, but he couldn't put his finger on why. With a sigh, Jonathan shoved his hands into his pockets and started toward the fence, eyes fixed on the faint glow coming from the windows of Laura's house. He bent down, grabbing a small stone, a habit he'd never outgrown. Throwing pebbles at her window had always been his way of breaking the ice, especially when Laura was upset. It was a simple gesture, one that had always worked, no matter how mad she was. But just as he was about to toss the stone, the blinds in Laura's room suddenly rolled down, cutting off the light. It was so perfectly timed, it almost felt deliberate. His hand froze mid-throw, and his eyebrows twitched in confusion. She knew he did this. It had been their thing since they were kids. Jonathan stood there, staring at the now closed blinds. It was the first time she'd ever shut him out like this. Even when she was upset, she'd always leave the window open, knowing he'd come. But tonight, it felt different. What the hell? Jonathan muttered, lowering his arm and dropping the stone. He stood there for a moment, staring at the closed blinds, unsure of what to do next. His instinct kicked in, the one he'd relied on since they were kids. He brought 2 fingers to his lips and let out a low, sharp whistle. "Laura," he called out, not too loudly, more of a loud whisper, like they used to do when sneaking out late at night. He waited for a response, but all he got was the rustling of leaves in the night breeze. Frowning, he whistled again, slightly louder this time. "Laura, come on, I know you're in there." But the window stayed dark and quiet. No playful retaliation, no teasing. Nothing. Jonathan shifted his weight from one foot to the other, feeling an unfamiliar knot of worry tightening in his chest. Why wasn't she answering? Normally, she'd be at the window, rolling her eyes at him for his persistence, but tonight she was gone. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated and uneasy. Frustrated, Jonathan pulled his phone from his pocket and quickly typed out a message, his fingers moving faster than his thoughts. "Seriously, open the window. What is wrong with you?" He hit send, staring at the screen, waiting for those familiar 3 dots to appear, signaling her response. Instead, a simple read notification popped up beneath his message. But nothing else followed. She'd seen it, and chose not to reply. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Something was definitely up, and he wasn't about to leave without figuring out what. With determination, he shoved his phone back into his pocket and marched toward her front door. He knocked firmly, stepping back and crossing his arms as he waited. A few moments passed before the door creaked open, revealing Laura's mother, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Jonathan, what a nice surprise. Happy birthday." She greeted me warmly. "Here to see Laura." Jonathan forced a smile, though his mind was elsewhere. "Yeah, Is she home?" Mrs. Levine nodded as her expression softened. "She is. But, well, I think she's had a long day. You know how she gets sometimes. You wanna go check on her?" She invited, knowing well her daughter has been liking Jonathan for what seems like an eternity. Chapter 3. Just be gentle with her, Mrs. Levine added, a hint of concern in her voice. "She's been a bit overwhelmed lately." "Yeah, okay," Jonathan replied with a touch of impatience creeping into his tone. He climbed the stairs as irritation bubbled beneath the surface. He reached her door and knocked softly, but his annoyance was creeping in. "Laura, it's me, Jonathan," but there was only silence. "Can I come in?" he called, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yeah, sure, come in," came her muffled response, but it felt more like a reluctant invitation than an enthusiastic one. Jonathan sighed, opening the door and stepping inside. "What's up with you? It's my birthday. We should be celebrating," he asked, his irritation clear. Laura let out a tired sigh, turning her back to him. "Yeah," she mumbled weakly. "Your gift is on my study table." She didn't look at him as she spoke, but Jonathan couldn't care less about the gift. What bothered him was his pouting childhood friend, the one he'd known forever who was now distant, worrying him more than he liked to admit. "Laura," he sighed again, softer this time, placing a hand on her shoulder, trying to get her to face him. "Tell me what's wrong," he almost pleaded, his voice lowering. The love he had for her as a friend was undeniable. "Please." Laura stole a glance at him as the weight of the moment pressed down on her. With another sigh, she finally sat up, which brought a small, relieved smile to his face. But that relief was short-lived. Her next words hit him like a punch he hadn't seen coming. "I like you, Jonathan. Ever since I learned what love is and saw you as someone I wanted to spend my life with. I fell in love with you." The confession stunned him, catching him completely off guard. For the first time in their long friendship, Jonathan was speechless. He had no idea how to respond. Jonathan's silence stretched on, and with every second, Laura felt her heart shatter a little more. She knew exactly what that silence meant. He didn't feel the same. With an awkward laugh, she forced herself to shrug off her own confession, her throat tightening as she fought back tears. But why, I'm not forcing you or anything. I just wanted to let you know. Don't feel burdened by my confession," she stammered, unable to meet his eyes. She had always known there was a high chance, no, a certainty, that he wouldn't reciprocate her feelings. But the thought of never telling him, of bottling it up forever, had been unbearable. So she told him, knowing full well what his silence would mean. And now, all she could do was cover up the pain with excuses. "You should go grab the gift," she said, her voice faltering as she fidgeted, trying to distract herself. "And get some sleep." But before she could finish, Jonathan's hands shot up, gently cupping her face, and without warning, he kissed her. Deeply. For the first time, Laura froze, her mind spinning. "This is real. He's kissing me." It wasn't just some fleeting, hesitant peck. It was a real kiss, one filled with a depth and intensity she hadn't expected. And for the first time in her life, the man she had loved for so long was holding her like she had always dreamed. Laura, who taken aback for only a moment, found herself responding to his kiss while her heart began racing. She melted into the moment, feeling the years of bottled-up emotions pour into that single, unexpected kiss. For a brief second, everything felt right, like her deepest wish had come true. But inside Jonathan's head, there was turmoil. Fear gripped him and tightened around his chest like a vice. "What am I doing?" his mind screamed, even as his lips pressed more firmly against hers. He feared if he didn't react the way she wanted, he'd lose her. Lose her forever. Because the truth was, he did love her, he loved her deeply. But not the way she wanted. Not in the way she deserved. To him, Laura was his best friend, the person who had always been there, a constant in his life. Just a friend, nothing more. Yet the kiss felt too perfect. Her warmth, the softness of her lips, it felt right, and that scared him even more. He found himself drawing nearer, caught in the intensity of it all, momentarily lost. But deep down, he knew this was wrong, that he wasn't kissing her out of love or passion, but out of a fear of losing the one person who had been there almost his whole life. What happens next? The thought hovered in his mind, nagging at him, but Jonathan pushed it aside, letting the moment carry them both further than he intended. Laura's hands clung to him, and he found himself sinking deeper into the intensity of the kiss, the closeness between them becoming electric. Every rational thought slipped away, leaving only the heat of the moment. Before either of them could grasp how far it had gone, they found themselves in a blur of discarded clothes, tangled limbs, and whispered breaths. Jonathan hovered over her, his heart pounding in his chest, but the weight of what was happening didn't hit him until it was too late. And the next thing they knew, they were both unclothed, tangled in each other's warmth, a boundary crossed that neither of them could take back. The night Jonathan spent with her became the most precious memory Laura held in her heart and mind. To her, it was the moment she had longed for, a night where her love was finally reciprocated. His touch, his closeness, felt like the answer to all her silent prayers. She allowed herself to be vulnerable, to be completely devoured by him, showing him through every embrace and every kiss just how deeply she loved him. In her mind, this was the moment her feelings had finally reached him, that everything between them would change. But little did she know, it was a night she would soon wish to forget. What felt like love to her was something far more complicated, far more painful, than she could ever imagine. The memory she cherished would soon turn into one she'd want to erase, because the truth behind that night would shatter her. Chapter 4. The next morning, Laura woke up to the quiet chill of an empty bed. Jonathan was gone, the space beside her cold as if he had slipped out hours before. She blinked groggily, trying to process the stillness around her. Slowly, she sat up as her body protested with a dull ache between her legs. A wince escaped her as the memory of the night flooded back, intense, raw, and filled with emotions she couldn't quite unravel. Her eyes drifted to the bed, the sight of blood-stained sheets staring back at her, a clear reminder of the reality she now faced. It was no wonder, it had been her first time, after all. Laura smiled softly as the warmth of last night wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. It was a moment she would cherish forever, filled with tenderness, and a love she believed had finally blossomed. With a renewed sense of hope, she headed to the bathroom to clean herself up, her heart still fluttering with the memory of Jonathan's touch and the intimacy they had shared. As she splashed water on her face, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that this was just the beginning of a beautiful chapter in her life. Once she was finally done, Laura dressed quickly with excitement bubbling within her at the thought of seeing Jonathan again. She couldn't wait to share the joy of last night, believing it would only deepen their bond. As she stepped downstairs, her radiant aura practically lit up the room. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Levine said, her eyes sparkling with warmth seeing her daughter finally in a good mood. "Seems you've had a good night. Where are you headed to?" Laura beamed, the glow of her happiness undeniable. "I was just going to find Jonathan. I wanted to surprise him with breakfast." The thought of seeing him again sent butterflies fluttering in her stomach, and she couldn't help but feel that today would be perfect. Mrs. Levine smiled knowingly, a hint of mischief in her gaze. "Just be sure to tell him how much you appreciate last night. I'm sure he'd love to hear it." Laura nodded enthusiastically, her heart racing as she moved toward the door, eager to find Jonathan and share the magic of their night together. So Laura ran out of her house with her heart racing in anticipation as she made her way to Jonathan's family home. She imagined his smile when he saw her, how they'd share breakfast and talk about their relationship finally reaching to such a level. But when she arrived, a strange knot began to form in her stomach. As Laura approached the front door and knocked, a sense of unease settled over her. It took a moment, but finally, Tabitha opened the door with a smile. "Hey, Laura, what are you doing here?" Tabitha asked, her tone cheerful. "Is Jonathan here?" Laura asked, barely able to contain her excitement. "Oh, he went out. I think he might be heading to his usual spot," Tabitha replied, smiling. Laura felt a rush of determination. "All right, I'll go see him. Good morning, by the way," she said, flashing a bright smile as she turned to leave. As she walked back to her house, her heart raced with anticipation. She quickly grabbed her car keys, imagining Jonathan's face lighting up when she found him. The thought of sharing breakfast with him, and everything else, filled her with warmth. She then climbed into her car and turned the key in the ignition as the engine began purring to life. She headed toward the usual hangout spot, a cafe nearby the public library where they often spent time together. Laura's excitement bubbled over. She couldn't wait to see him and to tell him just how much last night meant to her. Laura's heart pounded in her chest as she parked in front of the cafe, a small, quaint spot beside the public library where Jonathan liked to grab his coffee. But the moment she stepped out and glanced through the window, her stomach dropped. Jonathan was sitting across from another woman, a woman she recognized. She had seen her before. Jonathan had dated her, briefly but still enough to be remembered. Why is he meeting her? Laura wondered, her mind spinning after what had happened between them last night. She swallowed the lump in her throat as she walked towards them, barely aware of her legs carrying her forward. The jealousy and confusion bubbled up and it overwhelmed her. She hadn't planned to confront him like this, but her emotions got the best of her. Jonathan, Laura's voice wavered as she approached the table, trying to mask her trembling hands. What's happening here? Why are you with her? Jonathan instantly froze, the coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. The woman with him, catching Laura's distressed tone, raised a brow and snickered and leaned back in her chair. What do you mean? The woman said with a smirk. I'm his girlfriend. Of course, I'd be with him. Her words pierced through Laura like a dagger. All the hopes she had built up from last night were shattered instantly. Her face crumpled, and she looked at Jonathan with her tears threatening to spill from her eyes. His eyes widened, startled by the hurt in her expression. He quickly stood up, grabbing her arm and pulling her aside, away from the curious stares of the cafe patrons. Laura, stop, he muttered, his tone strained as he rubbed the back of his neck in frustration. Why are you crying? You're acting like a child. But her quiet sobs, the way she tried to hide her tears, tugged at him. Deep down, guilt gnawed at his insides, but he didn't know how to fix it. He never did. Are we still nothing after what happened last night? Laura finally asked, her voice cracking, her heart bleeding through every word. Am I just another girl in your collection? Her teary eyes searched his face, hoping for a shred of something different, a sign that last night had meant something more to him. Anything. Jonathan sighed heavily, closing his eyes as if trying to block out the scene. This was exactly what he feared. Things between them had gone too far. Boundaries. He needed to put up boundaries. Look, Laura, I could never see you as a lover. I could not even imagine kissing you. He hesitated, taking a deep breath. Forget about what happened last night. Just forget you ever confessed, and I'll forget about it too. Let's stay friends. Don't take the risk. It's not worth it. Her world crumbled around her. She stood there, silent for a moment, processing his words. Of course, she knew this might happen. She wasn't naive, but hearing him say it so plainly, so coldly, was a blow she hadn't been prepared for. Laura forced a bitter laugh as she wiped away the tears that betrayed her, refusing to break down any further in front of him. Right, of course, she whispered, nodding as if she were trying to convince herself. Sorry, I'm sorry for making it awkward. You're right, let's just be friends, Jonathan. Jonathan reached for her hand with guilt etched on his face as her smile, forced and pained, nearly shattered him. Laura, but she did not let him continue what he wanted to say as she placed a hand over his and gave it a light squeeze. She forced out a laugh that felt like broken glass in her throat. Seriously, it's okay. I'm your best friend. I could never stay mad at you for too long. You know that, right? Chill. Her words, though meant to ease the tension, came out hollow. Jonathan frowned, sensing the weight of her pain, but before he could say more, Laura pulled her hand away. She took a step back with her smile fragile and weak. I have somewhere I need to be, she said lightly, her voice cracking. Go back to your girlfriend. You should introduce her properly next time, yeah. She gave him a playful wave, her back already turning to leave before he could stop her. Chapter 5. Laura drove back home, her vision blurred by the flood of tears that she couldn't hold back any longer. The painful weight of Jonathan's words settled in her chest, squeezing her heart with every breath. She had tried to stay strong, to put on a brave face, but now, in the quiet of her car, there was no one to pretend for. Each tear that fell felt like another piece of her heart breaking, her grip tightening on the steering wheel as the reality of the situation sank in. How could I have been so naive? She wondered. She had given everything to Jonathan last night, her love, her trust, her body, and now it all felt like it meant nothing. As the familiar sight of her house came into view, Laura pulled into the driveway, letting out a shaky breath. She wiped her eyes hastily, but the tears kept coming, as though they wouldn't stop until she had cried out every bit of hope she'd once had for them. Laura stepped through the door with her face swollen from crying. Her eyes were red, and nose was raw. Mrs. Levine, who was sitting in the living room, glanced up supposedly to greet her daughter who just got back. But seeing her state, she immediately knew what had happened. Without asking a single question, she stood and wrapped her arms around her daughter, pulling her into a tight embrace. "It's all right, my love," she whispered with her soft and soothing voice while gently stroking Laura's hair. Laura's sobs grew louder, but she let herself melt into the comfort of her mother's arms. "It happens sometimes. You meet the wrong person who feels so right." Mrs. Levine's voice broke through the silence. Laura's sobs quieted for a moment as her mother's words sank in. "Maybe," Mrs. Levine continued, rubbing slow circles on her daughter's back, "maybe it's time you let go, She wasn't pushing, just gently guiding, but Laura's tears seemed to come harder, as if the thought of letting go was something she wasn't ready to face. Laura clung to her mother as if she were the only thing holding her together, her heart shattered, yet comforted by the warmth of someone who truly loved her. "Should I, Mom?" Laura's voice trembled as she finally started to relax after her flood of tears. Her grip on her mother loosened slightly, though her heart still ached. Mrs. Levine offered a soft smile and led her to the couch. Once they were seated, she gently held her daughter's hands in her own, squeezing them with warmth and care. "How do you feel about him?" Mrs. Levine asked, her tone calm and full of understanding. Laura looked down at their intertwined hands, thinking, "I don't know, Mom. I've loved him for so long. I thought maybe there is a chance between us." Her voice cracked, a fresh wave of sadness threatening to take over. "But now, it just hurts." Mrs. Levine nodded, brushing a stray tear from Laura's cheek. "It's okay to feel that way, darling. Love isn't always simple, and sometimes the people we hold close don't fit in the way we hope they would." Laura sniffled and leaned into her mother. "I don't know how to stop loving him." Her mother sighed as her hand began stroking Laura's hair. "Sometimes, the hardest thing is to realize that love doesn't always come back the way we give it. And that's not your fault, my love. But you deserve someone who loves you the same way you love them." Laura rested her head on her mother's shoulder, feeling the weight of her emotions begin to lift, if only slightly. "I thought I meant something to him. After everything we've been through together," she trailed off, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Levine gently kissed her forehead. "You do mean something to him. It's just that sometimes, the way people care about us isn't the way we need him to. Jonathan, he may love you, but not in the way you've always dreamed of." Laura squeezed her eyes shut, wishing she could shut out the truth. "I thought last night changed things. For once, I thought maybe he'd finally see me the way I see him." "I know, sweetheart." Mrs. Levine's voice softened even further. "But a relationship can't be built on one night, or on feelings that aren't mutual. You deserve someone who sees your worth every single day, not just when it's convenient." Laura sniffled, pulling herself upright, feeling the ache in her chest grow, but knowing her mother was right. It hurts so much, Mom. I don't know if I can let go. He's been my whole world." Mrs. Levine squeezed her hand again. "I know, love, and the best thing you can do now is let go. It doesn't mean you didn't love him, or that it wasn't real. It just means you're choosing to love yourself more, and that's something only you can decide when you're ready." Laura looked into her mother's eyes, seeing the wisdom and the love there. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to breathe, to consider a life where Jonathan wasn't the center of everything. "Maybe I just need some time," Laura whispered, her voice shaky but determined. And as their conversation lingered, the doorbell suddenly rang, startling the two. Mrs. Levine patted Laura's hand gently before walking toward the front door. Laura stayed seated, her heart still heavy but her mind a little clearer after their conversation. She heard the door creak open and her mother's surprised voice follow. "Oh, Jonathan, I wasn't expecting you." Mrs. Levine's voice was polite, but there was an edge to it as she stood in the doorway, her frame subtly blocking his entrance. Her gaze lingered, as if assessing his purpose. Jonathan shifted his weight, hands fidgeting in his pockets. "Is Laura inside?" he asked, his voice uncertain. He had no real plan, only the weight of guilt pushing him to be here. Mrs. Levine sighed, her eyes softening for a brief moment before she firmed her stance. "She is, but I don't think you should." "It's all right, Mom, I'll talk to him." Laura's voice cut through the air before Mrs. Levine could finish. Jonathan turned, catching sight of her descending the stairs. Her face was composed, but the stiffness in her movements betrayed the emotions she was trying so hard to hide. Mrs. Levine hesitated, clearly wanting to protect her daughter but respecting Laura's choice. With a lingering look between the two, she nodded and stepped aside, retreating further into the house, though her presence was still felt. Laura walked over to Jonathan, her steps steady but her heart racing. When she stopped in front of him, she plastered on a smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hi, is there something you need?" Her voice was calm, distant even. Jonathan's gaze softened as he looked at her. It was a mixture of guilt and pity, and the sight of it made Laura's chest tighten. She hated that look, hated being pitied for the love she had given so freely. She quickly averted her eyes, unable to bear his expression. "Here," Jonathan murmured, extending a cup of her favorite coffee toward her. Laura stared at it for a moment, the gesture reminding her of all the little things that had made her fall for him in the first place. His thoughtfulness, his care. But today, it felt hollow. "Thank you, but I already had mine." Laura forced a smile as she rejected the offering, her voice steady though her heart was anything but. Her response startled him. It was the first time she had ever refused something he gave her. There was an unfamiliar distance now, one he hadn't expected. Jonathan's hand, still holding the cup, clenched slightly before he pulled it back, unsure of how to react. "Oh," Jonathan looked down, awkwardly avoiding her gaze, unsure of what to say or do. Laura exhaled deeply as the weight of the moment pressed on her. She realized this might be her last chance to be honest and brave once more, to see if he'd finally give her something, anything in return. "I like you, Jonathan." "No, I love you, and I'm not loving anyone else but you." Her voice wavered slightly, but her words were firm, hanging in the air between them like a fragile thread. She stopped, watching him closely, hoping for a sign. But just like the night before, his reaction remained the same, silent, unsure, and distant. His eyes couldn't meet hers, and that was when the truth fully settled in. She couldn't make him love her, no matter how much she wanted it. No amount of shared history or friendship could change what his heart didn't feel. The realization stung, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. She couldn't keep holding on to the hope that maybe, someday, things would be different. Their friendship was the only thing left that could be saved, and she knew she had to protect that if nothing else. With a sigh, Laura reached out, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. This time, her smile was genuine, not forced or strained. "Let's be friends forever, just like you wanted." Her voice was soft but steady. "I'll be okay with that." Chapter 6. The next few days were harder for Laura than she ever imagined. Every small moment in her routine seemed to remind her of Jonathan, his laughter, their inside jokes, the countless hours spent together. Now, she had to force herself to stay distant, to resist the urge to call or text him like she used to. It was a daily struggle, pretending to move on when all she wanted was to fall back into the comfort of their friendship, however broken it had become. But for Jonathan, life seemed to return to normal effortlessly. The absence of Laura's constant presence didn't weigh on him the way it did on her. He was used to people coming and going, used to the attention of his playful, cheerful friend who always seemed to be chasing him around. Her sudden distance didn't matter much to him. If anything, his life slipped back into its usual rhythm: parties, women, indulging in whatever his heart desired. The void Laura left was barely noticeable, hidden beneath the layers of his carefree, self-indulgent lifestyle. There were moments, though, moments when they'd accidentally cross paths on the street or at a coffee shop. Jonathan would wave at her like nothing had changed, flashing his usual easygoing smile. Laura, on the other hand, could only muster a polite smile in return, her heart aching with the memory of how things used to be. The way she used to run up to him, joke with him, throw her arms around him, it was all gone now. Replaced by the silent acceptance of what their relationship had become. To Jonathan, it was just another wave. But for Laura, each encounter felt like a subtle reminder of all the love she had poured out, love that would never be returned. "Good morning, Laurie." Jonathan's cheerful voice rang out as he peeked over the concrete fence separating their houses, his grin wide and playful. Laura, lightly startled, paused her gardening, glancing up at him. Her hands were still busy with the small shovel, but she managed to smile, light, sincere, but lacking the usual warmth he was used to. "Morning," she replied softly. Jonathan noticed the subtle change in her demeanor and frowned slightly. "Oh, come on, Laura. Give your friend a wide smile. Please, are you mad at me?" he teased, trying to coax some enthusiasm out of her with his playful tone. Laura set the small shovel down, brushing the dirt from her hands. She sighed deeply, not out of anger but weariness. Standing up, she met his gaze, her smile still faint. "I'm not mad at you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But it wasn't enough for Jonathan. He wasn't used to this reserved version of her. "Say it louder, Laurie," he insisted, the teasing in his voice not fully masking his concern. "Come on, don't make me work so hard here." She hesitated but could feel his persistence weighing on her. With another resigned sigh, she finally gave in, repeating louder, "I'm not mad at you, Jonathan." "Then smile," Jonathan demanded like a child while his playful tone was tinged with insistence. Before Laura could react, the front door to her house creaked open, revealing her father, Mr. Levine. He stood there gripping the doorknob, his gaze fixed on Jonathan with an expression that carried more pressure than usual. Jonathan was startled by the stern look but trying to remain composed, offered a polite nod. "Good morning, Mr. Levine," he greeted, his usual confidence faltering slightly. Mr. Levine didn't respond, his eyes still locked on Jonathan. Instead, he called to his daughter, his voice stern. "Laura, get inside. Your mother and I have something to tell you." Laura glanced at Jonathan one last time with hesitation and reluctance. "Okay, Dad," she murmured, giving a small nod before walking away, leaving Jonathan standing alone by the fence. As Laura disappeared inside, Mr. Levine lingered at the door for a moment longer, his gaze unwavering. "Say hi to your father for me," he said in a tone that wasn't just a simple request. It carried an underlying weight, almost like a warning. Jonathan blinked, caught off guard by the shift in Mr. Levine's demeanor. "I will, sir," he managed to reply as he backed away from the fence, unsettled. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Jonathan standing there, confused. It was the first time Mr. Levine had ever looked at him like that, cold, almost bitter. Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, something he hadn't quite seen coming. Meanwhile, Laura sat on the couch, facing her mother, who seemed unusually fidgety and uncomfortable. Mrs. Levine's eyes darted away before settling back on her daughter's concerned gaze. "Mother," Laura began while her voice was soft but filled with worry. "Is there something wrong?" Mrs. Levine hesitated, clearly struggling with whatever was on her mind. Before Mrs. Levine could respond, her husband entered the wide living room, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Laura," he began, his tone firm and direct, "your mother and I talked, and we've come to the conclusion that it's time for you to get married. You're our only child, and your mother and I aren't getting any younger. We need you to take over the family business, with a husband to support you." His words came out as if everything was already decided, the final say resting with him as the head of the family. Mrs. Levine shifted uneasily, her voice soft as she tried to ease the situation. "Darling, please, speak softly," she muttered, fully aware that Laura's heart still clung to Jonathan. The idea of an arranged marriage might push the daughter into outright rebellion, a reaction Mrs. Levine feared deeply. But Laura's response stunned them both. Her expression remained calm, and the defiance Mrs. Levine expected never came. Instead, Laura looked at her father with a gentle smile. "You're right, Dad. You and Mom aren't getting any younger. I should have stepped up to help a long time ago. So if that's what you want, then I'm okay with it. I'll follow whatever you tell me to do." Her father blinked, momentarily caught off guard by her willingness. He had braced himself for an argument, but this was unexpected. I thought you'd rebel for a while," he muttered with a hint of disbelief in his voice. "But this is good. This is a good thing." Mrs. Levine's heart clenched as she watched her daughter with her smile too measured, too practiced. She knew Laura's compliance wasn't real, but her husband was too caught up in the practicality of the moment to notice the deeper struggle playing out in the daughter's eyes. "Well then, in 2 days' time, you'll meet the person we've chosen for you to marry," Mr. Levine stated firmly, his tone leaving little room for discussion. "He's a potential husband, and since you already know him, I suppose it won't be too difficult for you." Laura's heart skipped a beat, but her face remained composed. She offered a faint smile, concealing the turmoil building inside her. "Who is it?" she asked calmly. Chapter 7. Mr. Levine chuckled. "That would be a secret," he replied with a teasing smile before standing up. "Well then, I'm heading to the company. You get some rest, my love," he gently ordered his wife, leaning down to kiss the top of her head. Mrs. Levine smiled softly in response, a gesture of affection that didn't go unnoticed by Laura. Laura watched her parents and she couldn't help but smile. Because deep down, she wished for a love like theirs, to be treated with the same tenderness her father showed her mother. But then, her heart lingered on its true desire, Jonathan. The thought of him doing those things for her made her wince, realizing how much space he still occupied in her mind. "Are you okay, sweetie?" Aurelia asked, concerned by the sudden shift in Laura's expression. Laura quickly shrugged it off, forcing a smile. "Yes, Mom, I'm okay. I think I'll go back to the garden," she replied, standing up to escape the storm of emotions within her. "What do you mean, go back to the garden? You should go to your room and rest. We have an appointment this afternoon," Aurelia said with a warm smile. Laura tilted her head in confusion. "Appointment?" she repeated, unsure of what her mother meant. "Yes," Aurelia replied, her tone light but firm. "You'll want to be well rested for it. Go on, dear," she encouraged, gesturing toward the stairs. Reluctantly, Laura nodded and stood up, heading upstairs to her room. But the moment her door closed, she heard Jonathan's voice echoing in her space. "You left your window open," he said with a grin, startling her. Laura's eyes widened in shock, and she froze for a moment. "Why are you here?" she asked as a hint of panic creeped into her voice. She didn't want to revisit their last encounter, which had left her feeling so exposed. "I told you, you left the window open," he replied casually. "You know that's not what I'm asking," Laura interrupted sharply, her brow furrowing in irritation, which caught him off guard. Jonathan sighed as his expression finally softened. "I just wanted to see you. We saw each other like a few minutes ago," Laura shot back. "Yeah, but you've been distant with me lately," he countered, his gaze steady. "Why do I need to answer that? Get out already." She shooed him away, pushing him toward the window, causing him to panic. "Oof, careful, I'm gonna fall," Jonathan laughed, gripping the window frame tightly. "Seriously, out, now," Laura sighed, feeling both frustration and resignation. Jonathan paused, searching her eyes, and his tone shifted. "Do you hate me now?" The sudden seriousness took her back to the sting of rejection. "No," she replied, her voice softer than intended. She gave him a gentle push down the ladder he had used to climb into her room. "All right then, see you tomorrow," he smiled sincerely. "I'd like you to formally meet my girlfriend. You said you wanted to meet her, remember?" His words made Laura stop, her breath hitching slightly. It hit her hard. He didn't even consider her feelings after her confession. Jonathan truly saw her as just a friend and nothing more. A bitter smile crossed her lips as she looked away. "All right, text me anytime," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. With that, she closed the window and rolled down the blinds, shutting him, and the painful reality, out of her sight. Laura flopped onto her bed, as she buried her face in the pillow. She let the tears spill out as she tried to quiet her racing thoughts. The moments with Jonathan replayed in her mind, mingling with the painful realization of what he truly felt. As she fought to fall asleep, she clung to the hope that the right man will come and save her broken heart. Laura gasped and jolted awake while her heart began to race. She quickly scanned her room as her gaze landed on the clock. "Oh no," she mumbled, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. Panic surged through her as she rushed to the window and rolled up the blinds. The darkness outside confirmed her fear. It was already night. She immediately fumbled her way out of her room and nearly collided with Aurelia. "Oh, you're awake, dear," her mother exclaimed in her usual light tone. "Come have dinner with us." Still dazed, Laura followed her mother down the stairs, confusion clouding her mind. "Mom, I thought we had an appointment," she asked, noting the nonchalant expression on her mother's face. "You slept like a baby. It was hard to wake you up," Aurelia chuckled, brushing off Laura's concern. "I'm so sorry, Mom," Laura replied, guilt creeping in. "Oh hush, no need to dwell on it," Aurelia said, her smile unwavering. "Besides, your father picked out a dress for you." Laura blinked in surprise, her mind still foggy. "A dress?" she echoed, trying to piece things together. As they entered the dining room, she caught sight of a beautifully wrapped package on the table. "Yes, your father thought it would be perfect for your meeting with your soon-to-be fiancé," Aurelia said, her excitement shining through. "I can't wait for you to try it on." Laura felt nervous but curious at the same time as she approached the table. She carefully unwrapped the package, revealing a stunning dress, elegant yet youthful, its fabric shimmering softly under the dining room lights. "Wow," she murmured, touched by her father's thoughtfulness, even amidst her swirling emotions. "See, just a little something to help you lighten up your mood," Aurelia beamed, clearly proud. "Now, come sit down. Dinner is almost ready." Laura nodded as a small smile formed on her lips despite the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. She settled into her chair as the scent of home-cooked food wafting through the air, momentarily distracting her from her worries. As her mother busied herself in the kitchen, Laura's fingers brushed over the fabric of the dress, wondering how she would feel wearing it for someone who might not hold her heart. Then her father suddenly spoke, snapping her out of her reverie. "I want you to start acting like the deserving woman that you are, Laura. Stop chasing after your good-for-nothing friend who only knows how to party and bed women." Laura was stunned by her father's words. She felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she couldn't defend Jonathan. Deep down, she knew he wasn't the right man for her, even if he had moments of kindness that made her heart flutter. Dad, it's not," she started, but the words caught in her throat. "Laura, you deserve better," he continued, his tone firm but laced with concern. "You have a future to think about. I don't want to see my only child chasing after a man who does not know her worth." Laura bit her lip as she looked down. "I want you to have a last talk with Jonathan tomorrow. Settle everything before you meet the man you're marrying. Don't disappoint me, Laura." Her father's voice was stern, leaving no room for argument. "It's about time you let go." She nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words. The idea of facing Jonathan one last time, knowing it would be the end of something she cherished, made her chest tight. "Okay, Dad, I'll talk to him," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Chapter 8. Laura stood by the window with her breath hitching as she whispered her silent plea to the night. The weight of her father's words pressed heavily on her chest. "Let go. It's about time you let go." She leaned her elbows on the windowsill and rested her head in her hands. A single tear slid down her cheek but quickly wiped it away as if erasing the emotion could erase the truth. The stars twinkled above, indifferent to her pain, but she found herself speaking to them anyway. "I wish it was that easy to let go." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I wish it were that easy to forget him. The cool breeze kissed her face as if trying to soothe her, but the ache in her heart only deepened. She looked up at the sky with her throat tightening as she swallowed hard, forcing herself not to cry again. I wish that my heart could just not love him, she murmured, her voice trembling. And as if mocking her, a shooting star streaked across the dark sky. She blinked as her breath caught for a moment. Laura bit her lip and a bitter laugh escaped her. Wishes never come true, she thought. She had spent years wishing for Jonathan to love her back, and nothing had changed. The star disappeared into the horizon, leaving the sky just as it had been before. Laura sighed and stepped back, pulling the window shut. She collapsed onto her bed. And as if her mind was on cue, every bit of her memories of him came flashing before her eyes. Jonathan's smile, his laugh, his touch, and every moment she had with him. And yet, he was never truly hers. She stared at the ceiling with her body heavy with exhaustion, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Her father was right. She needed to let go. But how could she, when everything inside her still longed for him? When every beat of her heart whispered his name? Laura closed her eyes, hoping sleep would bring some peace. Jonathan leaned back against the bar while his arm draped casually over the back of a chair. His eyes scanned the crowd. The pulsing beat of the music thumped through the club as its lights flashed in rhythm, casting his face in shadows and flickers of neon. He grinned with drink in hand, as another girl came up to him, her eyes wide with admiration. "Jonathan," she squealed, barely containing her excitement. "I didn't know you were going to be here tonight." He flashed her a lazy smile, the kind that always got him what he wanted. "Surprise," he said, lifting his glass to her. The woman blushed, giggling as she leaned closer, her perfume heavy in the air. She wasn't the only one. Around him, women flirted, laughed, and tried to catch his attention, but Jonathan was in his element, soaking it all in. His handsome features, tousled dark hair, and easygoing charm made him the center of attention exactly where he liked to be. One of the women handed him another drink, and he took it without a second thought. He danced with a few of them, bodies moving in sync under the pulsing lights. The alcohol made everything blur together. He couldn't even remember the names of most of the girls, but it didn't matter. It was all about the thrill, the attention, the moment. As the night wore on, the drinks kept coming. The conversations were shallow, filled with laughter, teasing, and flirty banter. Jonathan reveled in it, the freedom, the lack of responsibility, the way everyone seemed to want a piece of him without expecting anything deeper. He pulled away from the dance floor for a moment, catching his breath. Leaning against the bar again, he downed the rest of his drink in one gulp, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. The room spun slightly, but he didn't care. Another woman, with long blonde hair and a tight dress, sidled up next to him. "Having fun?" she purred, her hand brushing against his arm. Jonathan smirked, his eyes briefly meeting hers. "Always." They danced for a while, bodies pressed close, the music drowning out any other thought. For Jonathan, this was life. The parties, the attention, the fleeting connections. Everything was simple here, no complications, no feelings to get in the way. But somewhere in the back of his mind, an image of Laura flickered, the memory of her confession whispering through the haze of alcohol. He quickly shoved it aside, focusing instead on the woman in front of him, letting the night swallow him whole. Tonight, he wasn't thinking about anything else. Tonight, he was just Jonathan, the man everyone wanted. But then suddenly, Eunice, his girlfriend, stormed into the club, her eyes scanning the room furiously until they landed on Jonathan, surrounded by women, laughing and carefree. Without hesitation, she marched toward him, grabbing his hand with a sharp tug and pulled him out of the circle. "Eunice, baby, you're here," Jonathan greeted with a sloppy grin, clearly still lost in the alcohol-fueled haze of the night. His voice slurred, and he swayed a little, oblivious to the storm brewing in front of him. Eunice crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her gaze hard and cold. "Didn't you say you were going to stop this?" She spat, her voice laced with barely contained fury. "Clubbing, drinking, and hanging out with these women. What's wrong with you? You have a girlfriend, Jonathan. But Jonathan only chuckled, shaking his head as if her words were an overreaction. He straightened up, trying to appear more composed, but the smirk still lingered on his lips. Eunice, baby, this is my life, he said dismissively. I've been doing this long before I even met you. What's the big deal? The big deal, Eunice echoed, her voice rising in disbelief. You're my boyfriend. You promised me things would change. Come on, even Laura never made a fuss about this. He waved her off, shrugging casually. At the mention of Laura's name, Eunice's expression darkened, her jaw tightening. Without warning, she raised her hand and slapped him hard across the face. The sharp crack echoed in the air, startling the nearby club goers. Jonathan staggered slightly, blinking in shock as the sting of the slap jolted him out of his drunken stupor. Again with her, Eunice's voice broke as anger mixed with hurt. You keep bringing her up like she matters more than I do. I'm done, Jonathan. Let's break up. You can have your fucking freedom back. Her words cut through the noise of the club, sharp and final. Before Jonathan could respond, Eunice turned on her heel and stormed away from the club, leaving him standing there, stunned. His cheek still burned from the slap, but the realization of what had just happened hit him harder. The hell is wrong with you, Jonathan? He muttered under his breath, rubbing his face as if the physical action would somehow clear his head. His thoughts were jumbled, the alcohol still clouding his senses, but the sting from Eunice's slap was sharp enough to cut through it. With a heavy sigh, he shoved his hands into his pockets and walked away as well. The hell is wrong with you, Jonathan? He mumbled again, louder this time, the frustration building. He wasn't sure if he was angry at Eunice, at himself, or at the way his life seemed to be spiraling into a mess he couldn't control. Either way, it didn't matter. It was easier to not think about it. Easier to just move on like he always did. With another sigh, he pulled his car keys from his pocket and headed toward the parking lot. Chapter 9. Jonathan woke up with a pounding headache as the familiar ache of a hangover settled in. His mouth was dry, and his body felt heavy as he groaned, pushing himself up from the bed. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, too bright for his liking, and he squinted against it, shielding his eyes with his hand. Ugh! What time is it? He muttered, glancing at his phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up with missed calls and messages, none of which he was in the mood to check right now. His head was still spinning, remnants of last night's drinking clinging to his thoughts like cobwebs. He stumbled out of bed, feeling the weight of the previous night bearing down on him. Flashes of Eunice's furious face came to him, her words, her slap, the sound of her heels clacking as she stormed out of the club. He rubbed the side of his face where she had slapped him, still feeling the sting, though it was his pride that hurt more. Why did I mention Laura? He groaned, realizing that was the trigger for the whole mess. He walked to the bathroom, turning on the tap and splashing cold water onto his face. It didn't help much. As he stood there, gripping the edges of the sink, he stared at his reflection in the mirror. His bloodshot eyes stared back, and he barely recognized the man looking at him. Disheveled hair, tired expression, a hollow emptiness beneath the surface. You're a mess, Jonathan, he muttered under his breath. He knew it was true, even if he didn't want to admit it. He had a girlfriend who just broke up with him and a best friend who's currently avoiding him. But as usual, he brushed it off. That was his coping mechanism: laugh it off, party harder, avoid responsibility. He grabbed a towel and dried his face, trying to shake off the grogginess. But even as the cold water cleared his head, the reality of his situation settled in. Jonathan groaned as the pounding in his head only grew worse while he dragged himself out of the bathroom. He needed a strong cup of coffee, something to clear his foggy mind. Dressing in a pair of sweatpants and a plain t-shirt, he glanced in the mirror, running a hand through his messy hair. He still looked presentable, or at least enough to face the world. Satisfied, he grabbed his car keys and headed downstairs, eager for the caffeine fix waiting at his usual cafe. As he descended the stairs, however, a quiet murmuring reached his ears. His family was gathered in the living room: his mother, father, and younger sister Tabitha all speaking in hushed tones, the air tense as if they were discussing something they didn't want him to overhear. Jonathan paused for a second on the bottom step, watching him curiously. The moment Tabitha spotted him, her eyes widened slightly, and she quickly cleared her throat. It was a clear signal to their parents to stop talking. The discreet conversation came to a sudden halt, and they all straightened up, pretending like they hadn't just been whispering about something important. His father shifted in his seat, and his mother gave a too bright smile, her hands nervously fiddling with a magazine on her lap. "Morning," Jonathan mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck. The atmosphere was thick with awkwardness, and he could feel the tension radiating from them. It wasn't the first time they'd done this, spoken quietly as if trying to keep something from him, but today, it felt more obvious, like they were deliberately avoiding letting him in on whatever was happening. "Morning, son," his father replied, his tone too casual. His mother nodded in agreement, offering a weak, "Good morning, Jonathan, late night." Tabitha just gave him a brief glance before she busied herself with her phone, trying to appear uninterested, though her body language gave her away. Jonathan could tell they had been talking about him, or at least something that involved him. "Yeah, something like that," Jonathan replied, his voice low. He wasn't in the mood to pry, especially not with the headache that was already doing a number on him, but their behavior stuck with him. "I'm heading out for some coffee," he added, trying to cut the awkwardness. "Coffee sounds good," his father said, leaning back in his chair, but there was something about his tone. Jonathan could feel his mother's gaze on him, her lips pressed together in a thin line, as if she wanted to say something but didn't know how. Before anyone could offer to join him or prolong the strained conversation, Jonathan turned on his heel and headed for the door. His hand gripped the keys tighter, an uncomfortable knot forming in his stomach. As soon as he stepped outside, he paused for a moment as his brows furrowed. What were they talking about? And why did it feel like they were walking on eggshells around me? Shaking off the thought, he slid into his car and started the engine. But still, he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever his family was talking about without him, it directly concerned him. Without another moment of hesitation, he turned the car off and stepped back inside the house. As he walked in, the air shifted, the energy in the room tensing as his family noticed his sudden return. His parents exchanged nervous glances, while Tabitha, caught off guard, stared at him with wide eyes. "Jonathan, you're back already?" his mother asked, her voice too light, too forced. He scanned their faces, suspicion creeping in. "Yeah," he said, his tone flat. "I forgot something." His father leaned forward slightly in his chair with a flicker of apprehension passing through his expression. "Is everything all right, son?" he asked, trying to sound casual but failing to hide the strain. Jonathan folded his arms and stood in the middle of the room, his gaze moving between them. "No, but you tell me, what were you all talking about earlier?" he asked directly, not bothering to dance around the tension. His mother shifted uncomfortably, her smile faltering. "Oh, it's nothing, dear, just some family matters." "Family matters," Jonathan echoed, raising a brow. "Because it looked like you were having a conversation you didn't want me to hear." Tabitha shot a glance at their parents, her lips pressing together tightly. "Jonathan, it's really nothing." "Enough," Jonathan interrupted, his patience thinning. "What's going on? Just tell me." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. His father sighed deeply, rubbing his temples as if bracing himself for something. His mother finally looked at him, her eyes soft with concern. "It's your older brother. He arrived earlier this morning." Jonathan flinched at the mention of his brother. The brother he had long hated. The brother he was always compared to, the one who excelled at everything, who always outshined him. Jonathan clenched his fists subtly, the familiar surge of anger rising within him. The perfect son, his mind taunted. Better grades, better looks, better at everything. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, masking his emotions behind a cool exterior. "That's it?" he asked, forcing a casual tone, even though his heart pounded in his chest. His voice didn't betray the bitterness stirring within. His family seemed to buy it. His mother gave him a small, relieved smile. Yes, dear. He's here to help with some business matters. We weren't trying to keep it from you. We just didn't want to overwhelm you first thing in the morning. Jonathan nodded stiffly. I see, he muttered, keeping his gaze lowered to avoid meeting their eyes. Overwhelm me, he thought bitterly, as if, we're not kids anymore. I'm not the same lousy brother he once had. Chapter 10. His father cleared his throat. He's in the study if you want to catch up. The idea made Jonathan's stomach turn. The last thing he wanted was to see his brother right now. He could already picture the smug look on his face, the patronizing way he always spoke to him, as if Jonathan was still a kid who needed guidance. I'll see him later, Jonathan said, his tone flat. He didn't give them time to respond as he turned and made his way out of the living room, his fists still clenched tight. He could feel the tension building, the weight of being in his brother's shadow pressing down on him like always. Once outside, he exhaled sharply, his mind racing. No matter how much he tried to escape it, the comparison, the resentment, the feeling of being second best, it always came back, especially whenever his brother reappeared in his life. Great, he thought, running a hand through his hair. Just what I needed. Jonathan forced himself to push the thoughts away, though it was easier said than done. Then suddenly, his eyes caught sight of Laura giggling just on the other side of the fence, like the other day. Laura, he thought, and he couldn't help but peek to see her. The sight froze him in place. Laura looked happy. Unlike how he had left her yesterday, she seemed unburdened and free. She was on her phone, texting and smiling, her face glowing with a lightness that tugged at his heart. For a brief moment, he felt a pang of longing, a reminder of the connection they once shared. What's going on? He wondered, his thoughts racing. She looked as if she was talking to someone special, someone who could make her smile like that, like he once had. The laughter bubbled up from her lips, and Jonathan's chest tightened. And sir, without thinking, he decided to interrupt her. Laurie, good morning, he called out with a smile, forcing a casual tone. He half expected Laura to look at him with disdain or, at the very least, indifference. But her response took him completely by surprise. Oh, hey Jonathan. She greeted him, her face lighting up with that same bright smile. The smile he hadn't realized he missed until now. Hi. What's up? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though the familiar warmth in her eyes made it hard to ignore the flood of emotions building inside him. Laura stood up from her seat, brushing off her skirt as she walked toward him, still smiling. Ooh, you stink, she teased, crinkling her nose in mock disgust. You partied all night, didn't you? Jonathan blinked, taken aback by her playful tone. There was no bitterness, no resentment, just the Laura he used to know, light-hearted and carefree. He chuckled despite himself, scratching the back of his neck. Yeah, maybe I did, he admitted, feeling oddly self-conscious under her gaze. Figured as much. She shook her head, still teasing him. You look like you need a gallon of coffee and maybe a shower, she added with a wink. Jonathan couldn't help but laugh, but beneath his amusement was a flicker of unease. He'd expected the next encounter to be awkward, heavy with everything that had happened between them. Yet here she was, treating him like the same old friend she'd always been. Glad to see you're not mad at me, he said cautiously, his tone light but probing. Laura's smile faltered for a brief moment, her eyes flickering with something deeper. Mad at you? She repeated, tilting her head slightly. Why would I be mad at you? Silly? She asked, reaching out to pat his head in a playful, almost dismissive gesture. Jonathan hummed in satisfaction, leaning into the touch without thinking. It felt natural, comforting even. But he couldn't shake the nagging feeling creeping in. Who are you talking to? He asked, his tone turning a bit more interrogative as he gestured toward her phone. Laura merely shrugged as a mischievous grin spread across her face. Instead of answering, she kept the mystery alive. Oh, come on, we're friends. We don't keep secrets from each other, Jonathan whined playfully, narrowing his eyes as if to coax the truth out of her. She just giggled, the sound light and carefree, something he hadn't heard in a while. I told you it's a secret, she teased. You'll know when the right time comes. There was something in the way she said it, a certain adorableness that tugged at his heartstrings in a way he hadn't expected. Jonathan felt a twinge in his chest but masked it with a playful sigh. All right, I'll let it slide, for now, he said, feigning disappointment. Then, trying to brush off the strange tension that lingered in the air, he added, well then, you wanna come with me and grab a cup of coffee? Without looking in his direction, Laura shrugged nonchalantly. Sure, she replied, her tone plain, almost indifferent. The drive to their usual cafe was filled with an awkward silence, broken only by Laura's occasional stifled giggles and laughter. Jonathan gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing with thoughts about who she could be talking to. Each chuckle from her felt like a small stab of jealousy, growing sharper as the minutes passed. She was right there beside him, but it felt as though her mind was somewhere else, focused on whoever was on the other side of the phone. The pattern continued even after they arrived at the cafe. They ordered their usuals and sat down to drink, but Laura's attention was glued to her phone. Jonathan sipped his coffee, unable to ignore the way her fingers tapped quickly across the screen, her face lighting up with every new message. Laura, he finally spoke, his tone light but with an edge of irritation. Eyes off the phone, your coffee's getting cold. She looked up briefly, a half smile on her lips, but the phone remained in her hand, her thumb still idly scrolling. Who are you even talking to? Jonathan asked, his voice softer this time, laced with curiosity but unable to hide the tinge of jealousy. He hated that he felt this way, but seeing her so engrossed in someone else, it bothered him more than he cared to admit. Laura chuckled softly at Jonathan's reaction, her eyes sparkling with amusement as she sipped her coffee. I'll keep his identity for now, she teased, leaning back in her chair. But I promise, you'll know him soon enough. Jonathan raised an eyebrow, leaning in slightly as if trying to decipher her expression. Why keep his identity? He asked, his tone slightly defensive. It's not like it'd matter. Wait. He paused, his eyes narrowing. You're talking to a guy? The disbelief in his voice was unmistakable, and he scoffed, his eyebrows twitching as if trying to make sense of the revelation. Laura bit her lip, clearly trying not to make her joy too obvious. Yeah, she said casually, as though it wasn't a big deal. A guy. Jonathan's chest tightened. I just thought, he began, his words trailing off. He didn't know what he thought. He didn't know why the idea of Laura talking to another guy, any guy, suddenly made him feel so unsettled. Chapter 11. I need to go home, Jonathan, Laura blurted out suddenly, her eyes darting to her phone again. She stood up quickly, grabbing her things in a flurry of motion. I have somewhere to go today. Jonathan blinked, caught off guard. Wait, already? He asked, but before he could say much else, Laura was already halfway to the door. See you later, she called over her shoulder, flashing him a quick smile before rushing outside. Jonathan watched as she waved down a cab, his hand halfway raised in a futile attempt to stop her. As the cab pulled away, Jonathan sat back down, a strange, hollow feeling settling in his chest. The coffee in front of him went untouched, cooling rapidly as he stared at the spot where Laura had been just moments before. Jonathan stabbed his fork into the steak on his plate, the sharp clink of metal on ceramic echoing in the otherwise silent dining room. The atmosphere was intense, as usual, during family dinners, his father at the head of the table, his mother seated next to him, and Tabitha across from Jonathan with her face gleaming in anticipation. The only sound that filled the space was the faint clattering of utensils, the weight of unsaid words pressing on Jonathan's chest. Then, the silence broke. How was your travel, Nathaniel? Mr. Reed's deep voice carried across the table, directed toward his eldest son. Jonathan stiffened, keeping his gaze focused on his plate. Of course, he thought bitterly. The golden child, Nathaniel, who was ever composed, slowly set down his utensils and dabbed his mouth with a napkin, his expression soft and refined. It was good, Dad. I've been excited to finally be home. His voice was smooth, calm, everything Jonathan's wasn't. Tabitha, always eager for attention, grinned and chimed in. Did you get me souvenirs, brother? she asked, her tone playful, full of the spoiled innocence she could afford as the youngest. Nathaniel chuckled, his perfect older brother charm never wavering. I could never forget you, Tabitha. His gaze then flicked over to Jonathan, his smile steady but more cautious. You too, little brother. Jonathan's jaw clenched. He could feel all eyes shift to him, but he didn't lift his head. He just stabbed at his food harder. Why did you come here, really? Jonathan's voice came out sharper than he intended, slicing through the polite atmosphere like a blade. His question caught everyone off guard, especially Nathaniel. Jonathan finally looked up, meeting his brother's eyes with a cold glare. Did you come back to take over Dad's company? I thought you weren't interested in Dad's wealth. The room tensed immediately, Tabitha's smile fading as Mrs. Reed glanced nervously at her husband. Mr. Reed instantly shot a warning look in Jonathan's direction, his voice barely contained. Jonathan, but Nathaniel, ever the saint, raised his hand with his smile unwavering. It's okay, Dad. He looked at Jonathan with an almost pitying expression. I'm not planning to take over the company. We already talked about it. His eyes softened as he spoke. I want you to handle it, little brother. After all, I'm getting married soon. I have other responsibilities to take care of. At his words, a stunned silence immediately filled the room. Married, Tabitha exclaimed, her excitement returning in full force. To who? Why didn't you tell us sooner? Her voice was eager, her eyes shining with curiosity. Mrs. Reed, too, looked stunned but quickly beamed with pride. Oh, my goodness, Nathaniel. That's wonderful news. Who's the lucky girl? And Mr. Reed, for the first time that night, smiled genuinely, leaning forward. How did you? Jonathan felt his stomach twist as Nathaniel paused. His older brother hesitated for a brief second, his gaze flicking toward Jonathan before he spoke. The motion was so small, it was barely noticeable to anyone else, but Jonathan caught it. His grip tightened around his knife. We met a long time ago, Nathaniel finally said, his voice laced with warmth. She wasn't interested in me at first, but her father contacted me and mentioned her. I agreed immediately. She's one of a kind. Nathaniel's words hung in the air, filled with affection, but Jonathan kept his focus on his plate, his stomach churning. Of course, he thought bitterly. Nathaniel comes back and everything revolves around him. Again, he could feel the weight of his family's admiration directed entirely at Nathaniel, the golden son, the successful one, the one who always made him proud. Meanwhile, Jonathan was just there, a shadow that never quite measured up. As his family marveled over Nathaniel's engagement and bombarded him with questions, Jonathan's thoughts began to drift. No matter what he did, he could never escape his brother's shadow. His knuckles whitened as he gripped his fork, the sound of his family's happy chatter fading into the background. All Jonathan could hear was the pounding of his own heart. Mrs. Reed leaned forward as a proud smile spread across her face, her eyes gleaming with excitement as she absorbed Nathaniel's news. Why didn't you tell us sooner? She asked, her voice brimming with pride and joy. It was clear that the idea of her eldest son finally bringing home a daughter-in-law filled her with deep satisfaction. Nathaniel smiled warmly at her, a hint of apology in his expression. That's why I flew here, Mom. I wanted to tell you in person. He paused, glancing at the faces around the table. I need your help with the arrangements. I'll be announcing our engagement in 2 days, and I thought we could have a humble party to celebrate. The table buzzed with excitement. Mrs. Reed clasped her hands together, practically glowing with pride. Mr. Reed's face softened into a pleased smile, clearly happy with the news. Tabitha, of course, couldn't contain her excitement and immediately began peppering Nathaniel with questions about the party and his fiancée. But Jonathan sat in silence, his jaw tightening as he absorbed his brother's words. 2 days. He could feel his chest tightening again. So this is why he came back. His mind raced with thoughts of the impending engagement, and the attention Nathaniel would continue to steal. He forced himself to keep calm, even as the weight of his brother's presence pressed down on him more than ever. Chapter 12. When morning came, Jonathan woke up feeling the usual burden of frustration settling in his chest. His thoughts circled back to his brother, Nathaniel, always Nathaniel. Whenever he felt like this, he had one place to go: Laura. She had always been his solace. And without thinking too much, Jonathan grabbed his jacket and headed toward the Levines' house, his mind set on finding comfort. He knocked on the door, expecting the usual, a quiet exchange with Mrs. Levine before getting to Laura. But to his surprise, when the door swung open, Mrs. Levine's face broke into a warm smile. "Oh, hello, Jonathan. Come in," she said, her voice filled with a kindness that threw him off balance. Jonathan blinked, confused. Just the other day, she had barely let him in, her manner cool and hesitant. But now, there was no trace of that hesitation, only an open, welcoming gesture that felt strangely different. He hesitated for a moment, but then stepped inside, feeling a growing sense of unease, unsure of what had changed. Is Laura home?" Jonathan asked, glancing around the living room, expecting to see her lounging on the couch or tucked away with a book in her usual spot. Mrs. Levine nodded, still smiling. "She is, but she's a bit busy this morning. Why don't you sit down for a moment, dear?" Her tone was gentle, almost too pleasant, and it did nothing to ease Jonathan's confusion. Their attention was suddenly caught as Laura's footsteps echoed softly down the stairs. When Laura appeared, Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. She looked different. She wore a light pink long-sleeved dress, the hem short enough to reveal her smooth, flawless legs. Her hair was braided neatly to the side, and a soft, clean layer of makeup brightened her features, with a tint of red on her lips that made them look too inviting. Jonathan blinked. This wasn't the first time he'd seen her dressed up, but something about this look unsettled him. It wasn't just the dress, it was the fact that she was wearing it to go somewhere without him. The thought irritated him more than he expected. Why wear something like that? A knot of frustration tightened in his chest. "Oh, Jonathan." Laura's voice broke his thoughts. She blinked, her expression demure, not nearly as enthusiastic as she usually was when he dropped by. "What brought you here?" Her casual tone stung. "What do you mean, what brought me here?" Jonathan thought, frowning inwardly. "I'm your friend. Isn't it normal for me to visit you?" Out loud, he blurted, "Where are you going?" His voice was sharper than intended. Laura smiled, leaning down to kiss her mother on the cheek. "I'm going out to buy something," she replied, her tone light but giving away nothing. Jonathan stared, unsatisfied. Buy something? Wearing that? His thoughts whirled with jealousy, though he couldn't quite understand why. "Then, can I go with you?" he asked abruptly, unable to hide the edge in his voice. "We can talk on the way." Laura hesitated, her gaze lingering on him as if weighing her options. Then, with a small chuckle, she nodded. "Sure. Let's go. Saves me the hassle of driving." Her response was light-hearted, but Jonathan couldn't shake the unease in his chest as they walked out together. Something about this morning felt different. "Why am I getting worked up over this?" he thought, glancing at her again. As they settled into the car, Jonathan closed the door and was instantly enveloped by Laura's sweet, intoxicating scent. It was subtle, but powerful enough to make him flinch. His grip on the steering wheel tightened as his eyes drifted toward her, watching her buckle her seatbelt. His gaze lingered longer than it should have, drawn to how effortlessly beautiful she looked. The lightness of her perfume filled the space, clouding his thoughts. Suddenly, Laura turned to him, her brow furrowing slightly. "What's wrong?" she asked, her tone innocent and eyes wide, completely unaware of the turmoil bubbling inside him. Jonathan quickly averted his eyes, clearing his throat. Ugh. He tried to push the thoughts away, but it only made the confusion deepens. This wasn't the same woman who had once confessed to him, the one who had looked at him with those same eyes, filled with hope and vulnerability. Now, they seemed distant, almost carefree, as if the weight she once carried for him had vanished. Nothing," Jonathan stammered, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." Laura tilted her head slightly, curious but not pushing further. She simply smiled, that same bright smile she'd given him earlier, and turned her gaze back to the road ahead, leaving Jonathan alone with his thoughts. The drive had been quiet, the air heavy with unspoken thoughts until Laura broke the silence. You said you wanted to talk on the way, she asked casually, turning her head slightly toward him. Ah, yes, Jonathan answered, pulling himself from his tangled thoughts. He glanced at her quickly, trying to read her expression. How have you been? What do you mean? She responded with a soft chuckle. We just saw each other yesterday. Yeah, and you left me alone at the cafe, he added with a chuckle, though there was a hint of frustration buried beneath it. Laura gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth as she apologized. Oh no. I am so sorry, I didn't mean to. It's okay. Jonathan cut her off, laughing lightly, trying to wave it off. I do leave you hanging sometimes. I deserved it. Ha ha. His voice softened. But at least now I get to be with you. Laura glanced at him, her lips twitching into a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. So, what did you want to tell me? She asked, shifting the conversation forward, her curiosity piqued as they neared her destination. Jonathan hesitated for a moment before speaking, his eyes flickering between her and the road. My girlfriend and I broke up, he confessed with a bitter chuckle, half expecting some kind of reaction from her. Laura's expression remained calm, almost indifferent. I see, she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the news didn't matter much to her. Her gaze stayed fixed ahead, unfazed by the revelation. Jonathan blinked in surprise. That's it? He asked, confusion creeping into his voice. Laura finally turned to him, raising an eyebrow. I mean, it's not your first breakup. As far as I've known, when girls break up with you, you just shrug it off, so what's the big deal, right? She smirked, her tone teasing, as if trying to make light of the situation. The words stung more than Jonathan had anticipated. Her casual dismissal of his pain gnawed at him, leaving him feeling hollow. She doesn't care. He forced a smile, laughing along with her joke, but the laughter felt wrong, as if he was losing something he couldn't quite grasp. Just then, Laura perked up, her eyes lighting up as she pointed out the window. Drop me off here, she said with a smile. Jonathan's foot hit the brake instinctively, his brows furrowing not just because she was about to leave him alone again, but because of what he saw outside. A man stood by the road, waiting for her. Dressed in a sharp black suit, the man smiled warmly, his confidence and ease unsettling Jonathan. The sight of him there waiting for Laura shocked him to his core. Thanks, Laura said nonchalantly as she closed the door, leaving Jonathan stunned. He watched her walk over to the man, who immediately offered his arm. Laura, without hesitation, clung to him, smiling as if she had known him forever. Jonathan's grip tightened around the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He felt his heart race as a pit formed in his stomach. What the hell? He muttered under his breath. Chapter 13. Jonathan's grip tightened around the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He felt his heart race, a pit forming in his stomach. What the hell? He muttered under his breath, his mind spinning with questions, confusion, and a gnawing sense of jealousy. Who is he? Why didn't she mention anything? The sight of Laura walking away with another man made something snap inside him, something he couldn't quite control. Meanwhile, Laura giggled lightly, her arm still linked with the man beside her. Congratulations, Mr. Elsher. I bet your wife is pretty much occupied now that you have a baby on the way, she said softly, her tone warm and friendly. Mr. Elsher, her father's secretary, chuckled in response. Thank you, and yes, she is, he replied with a smile, his voice filled with pride. We're both adjusting, but it's been an exciting time. Laura smiled genuinely, her mood light and carefree. She continued walking with Mr. Elsher as the conversation flowed easily between them as if they had known each other for years. The two walked into a nearby boutique and the door chimed softly as they entered. Immediately, the staff approached them with welcoming smiles. Good morning, Miss Levine. Mr. Elsher, welcome. One of the attendants greeted, bowing slightly in respect. Laura returned the smile and nodded. Morning, I'm here for the piece I requested, Laura said, her tone friendly yet businesslike. Of course, right this way, the attendant gestured, leading him further inside. With a quick glance back at Mr. Elsher, Laura excused herself. "I won't be long." Mr. Elsher gave a polite nod and smiled as a staff member led him to a nearby couch, situated close to the fitting room. "What would you like, sir? We can offer you some drinks and snacks while you wait for the miss," the staff kindly offered. "No, thank you, I'm good," Mr. Elsher replied with a small wave of his hand. The staff member smiled and moved away, leaving him to wait comfortably. Just then, Laura appeared, her excitement apparent as she walked in holding a white dress delicately draped over her arm. "I'm gonna try it on," she said with a gleam in her eyes, her voice carrying an enthusiasm she couldn't hide. Without waiting for a response, she hurried off toward the fitting room, eager to see how the dress would fit. Elsher chuckled lightly, watching her disappear behind the fitting room door. A few moments passed as Mr. Elsher sat patiently, occasionally glancing toward the fitting room. The soft rustling of fabric and the faint sound of a zipper being pulled could be heard as Laura tried on the dress. Then, the door creaked open, and Laura stepped out. The sight was enough to catch even Mr. Elsher's attention. The dress was perfect, better than she had imagined. The sleek white gown hugged her figure flawlessly, its fabric smooth and elegant. A high slit on one side revealed just enough of her legs to keep the design bold yet tasteful, while the thin straps framed her shoulders delicately. The clean lines of the dress accentuated her silhouette, and the soft white contrasted beautifully with her smooth skin. Her hair, still loosely braided to the side, added a subtle touch of casual charm, balancing the formality of the dress. Laura stood in front of the mirror, her eyes widening in awe. "Wow," she whispered, running her hands down the fabric as if to confirm it was real. She turned slightly, looking at herself from different angles, the dress moving gracefully with her every step. Mr. Elsher smiled, sensing her delight even from across the room. "It really is made for you," he commented warmly, offering his quiet approval. Laura turned to him with a bright smile spreading across her face. "It's perfect," she said, still in disbelief at how well it turned out. She twirled slightly, watching the way the dress flowed with her movement. "I can't believe how good it feels." The staff, who had been observing quietly, approached her. "It fits you beautifully, miss. Would you like us to make any adjustments, or is this exactly how you envisioned it?" Laura shook her head, still smiling as she caught her reflection once more. "No changes. It's perfect just the way it is." Jonathan stormed into the house, the heavy front door slamming shut behind him. His jaw was clenched, each step loud and forceful as he stomped through the hallway, still replaying the image of Laura clinging to that man's arm over and over in his mind. His frustration simmered, bubbling just beneath the surface. As he approached the living room, the sound of soft giggles and lively chatter echoed, clashing with his mood. His frown deepened. When he turned the corner, the sight only heightened his annoyance. There, in the center of the room, his brother Nathaniel stood tall, smiling modestly as their mother and Tabitha fussed over him. Nathaniel was dressed in an expensive tuxedo sharp and perfectly tailored to his frame. His mother's eyes gleamed with pride, and Tabitha couldn't stop squealing with excitement, adjusting Nathaniel's bow tie with giddy laughter. "Look at you, Nate," Tabitha giggled. "You look so dashing." Mrs. Reed beamed. "Absolutely perfect. You're going to steal the show at the engagement party." Jonathan's stomach twisted. Of course, it's Nathaniel again, he thought bitterly. His brother basked in the attention he was always given. He felt the anger rise in his chest. Nathaniel, noticing his presence, smiled warmly. "Oh, hey, little brother. You're back." Jonathan's fists tightened at his sides, his frustration boiling over into a sharp glare. He couldn't bring himself to speak as the room seemed to revolve around Nathaniel yet again. He couldn't bring himself to speak. The words stuck in his throat, bitterness swirling in his chest like a storm about to break. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, his footsteps heavy against the floor. Tabitha, who had been watching him from the corner of her eye, immediately noticed the tension radiating from him. She sighed, sensing something far deeper than the usual sibling rivalry simmering beneath his anger. "I'll be right back, Mom," she said softly, giving a brief glance toward her mother and Nathaniel, who remained caught up in their moment. Tabitha hurried after Jonathan, catching up to him in the hallway upstairs just as he reached the front door of his room. "Jonathan," she called out, her voice firm but not unkind. He stopped but didn't turn around, his shoulders rising and falling with each labored breath. Tabitha quickened her pace until she was right behind him. "What's going on with you?" Tabitha asked, her voice laced with concern. "Nothing. Go back to your other brother," Jonathan spat, his words laced with bitterness. Tabitha crossed her arms, unimpressed by his attitude. "Oh, come on. I know you're jealous of Nathaniel, but I know you more than you think, Jonathan." She raised a brow at him, her expression firm yet curious. "So, out with it." Jonathan sat on his bed, his elbows resting on his knees, while Tabitha settled just a meter away, watching him closely as she waited for him to talk. He took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I think Laura has a boyfriend," he finally blurted out, his voice low and uncertain. Tabitha's lips twitched at the admission. "So?" Jonathan frowned, not expecting that response. "What do you mean, so?" "I just said Laura has a boyfriend." "Yeah, I heard you." Tabitha shrugged, almost sounding tired of the subject already. "So what if she has a boyfriend? What's the big deal? She should have told me. I'm her friend." Jonathan's voice rose, his frustration clear in every syllable. Tabitha scoffed, shaking her head. "A friend is a friend, Jonathan. It's up to her whether she wants you to know about certain things or not. That's her personal life." He stared at her in disbelief, unable to accept what she was saying. "But, no buts," she cut him off, raising her hand as if to physically stop his spiraling thoughts. "You're both grown adults, Jonathan. She knows how to live her own life, and yes, she knows how to fall in love, too." Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, his frustration bubbling over. "Yeah, and that's exactly the thing. If she has a boyfriend now, then she's probably in love, right?" His voice wavered, and he groaned, burying his face in his hands. "Right, so." Tabitha raised a brow, genuinely confused about where he was going with this. He dropped his hands, his eyes filled with confusion and frustration. "She confessed to me, days ago. Told me she's in love with me. So, you can see why I'm confused when I suddenly see her with another guy. It's the first time I've ever seen her with someone other than me or her dad." Tabitha exhaled deeply, a knowing look crossing her face. "No, Jonathan," she said softly. "That wasn't the first time she was with another guy. That was your first time seeing her with one. You've never looked her way before, not really. You never paid attention." Jonathan blinked, stunned, but Tabitha didn't let up. "Even though I knew she liked you. Everyone knew. You never noticed her. You were too wrapped up in your own world. And now, suddenly, because you've seen her with someone else, you care. That's on you, not her." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in. "She can't always chase after you like some loyal pet, Jonathan," Tabitha said, her voice soft yet firm, the truth cutting through the tension. "Yes, she's your friend, your best friend, even. But she has a life to live, and maybe she's found someone who can give her the family she's dreaming of." Jonathan let out a heavy sigh, his brows furrowing as he shut his eyes, the weight of her words sinking in. Before he could respond, Tabitha smirked, scoffing lightly as if a realization had hit her. "Let me guess, you rejected her, didn't you?" she teased, watching her brother's reaction. His eyes opened, locking with hers, and that was all the confirmation she needed. "Ah, I knew it," she said, shaking her head. "Good for her." She stood up, chuckling to herself, clearly amused at how this conversation was going nowhere. Jonathan, still reeling, stared at her, confused and a little insulted. "What do you mean, good for her?" he asked, his tone defensive. "I mean, she's finally moved on. That's a fact." Tabitha shrugged casually. "Now that I think about it, it's good for you too. No more clingy best friend chasing after you, shooing away your potential women, right? You're free now, Jonathan. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" She gave him a knowing look before turning to leave his room when Jonathan suddenly spoke, his voice sharp with alarm. What? When did I say that? His heart raced, thinking that maybe Laura had heard something from Tabitha, and that was why she had been avoiding him lately. Tabitha paused, slowly turning back to face him, her brow arched in mild amusement. Well, you didn't exactly say it, through words, she replied, her tone laced with sarcasm. But from all your actions. Oh yes, 100%. Jonathan's jaw tightened as he stared at her, feeling a surge of defensiveness. What actions? He demanded, his mind scrambling for clarity. Tabitha crossed her arms, giving him an exasperated look. Really, Jonathan, you're going to pretend you haven't been pushing her away for years? The way you treat her like an afterthought. The way you run after every girl except the one who's been there for you this whole time. Trust me, you didn't have to say it. Laura got the message loud and clear. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, and for the first time, Jonathan was speechless. Tabitha scoffed, satisfied as she walked out of the room, leaving Jonathan to his thoughts. She headed back downstairs and, upon seeing her mother and eldest brother, pouted playfully, acting like the innocent little sister again. Are you done already? Yeah. I'm going out later to prepare the venue for tomorrow's party, Nathaniel replied with a light smile. Ooh, I want to go with you. Of course, why don't you and Mom get dressed and join me? He invited, prompting excitement from both of them. Yes, let's go, Mom, Tabitha exclaimed, leaping with enthusiasm as she pulled her mother along. As soon as they were out of sight, Nathaniel glanced toward the direction to Jonathan's room before sighing deeply, and decided to head to his own room to change into more comfortable clothes. Whoa, this place is beautiful, Tabitha whispered in awe, her voice barely containing her excitement as her eyes wandered to every corner. The chandeliers above cast shimmering light across the room, making the entire space seem to glow. She spun slowly, taking in the grand marble floors beneath her feet, the intricate detailing along the walls, and the soft drapes that framed the massive windows. You really outdid yourself this time, she said, her breath catching. Mom and Dad were right, brother. You're good at everything. This place is huge. Everywhere you look, it's sparkling like something out of a dream. Nathaniel chuckled, glancing at his sister. I'm glad you like it. I just hope she does too, he sighed in relief. Are you kidding me? What kind of woman wouldn't like this? Tabitha nearly laughed, shaking her head in disbelief. She's a simple woman, Nathaniel explained, his tone softening. Her family's well off, but she never lived extravagantly. That's what I love about her, she's perfect for me. He smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across his face. Their mother smiled too, her heart full as she watched her son finally find true happiness. Meanwhile, Tabitha remained in awe, unable to believe how head over heels her brother looked. Chapter 15. The day of Nathaniel's party had finally come. The venue, which was a well-known luxury hotel downtown, became busy with staff making final preparations for this event. It was the perfect backdrop for his big announcement. Not only was he back home for good, but he was also going to reveal the woman he intended to marry, a woman no one in the family had known yet, maybe. Meanwhile, back at home, the energy was electric. Their parents had been up since dawn, making sure everything would go smoothly. Even though the hotel had its own team of event planners, they couldn't help but double-check every detail. Tabitha, as well, was still in her room, struggling with which dress to wear. She rifled through her wardrobe, tossing gowns aside, too excited to settle on anything. Her curiosity was getting the best of her after her brother's secrecy. Today was the day they'd finally meet the mysterious fiancé. But while the rest of the house was feeling excited with anticipation, Jonathan stayed locked in his room, detached from the excitement. He sat on the edge of his bed with phone in hand, staring at the screen where Laura's name sat. His thumb hovered over the call button, but he couldn't bring himself to press it. The idea of attending Nathaniel's party surrounded by family, friends, and all the people who'd line up to congratulate his brother felt suffocating. Nathaniel had always been the center of attention, the one with everything figured out. Jonathan wasn't jealous, not really. But the thought of another night where Nathaniel was the star and Jonathan was just there, in the background, made him want to disappear. Laura, though, Laura was different. She had always been able to pull him out of that dark space. Whenever things got too heavy or he felt like he was sinking under his own family's expectations, she knew exactly how to lighten the load. Her laugh, her way of making everything seem less complicated, that's what he needed right now. His thumb hovered over her name on the screen with the call button just a press away. But before he could make the decision, a knock came at the door. "Jonathan, are you dressed?" His father's voice echoed through the wood, firm but with that usual edge of expectation. "Make sure you're presentable, we're meeting your brother's future-in-laws today. And it is a formal occasion." Jonathan closed his eyes and let out a quiet groan of frustration. Of course. He rolled his eyes, barely managing to keep the irritation from surfacing too much. "Yeah, whatever," he muttered under his breath. So he threw his phone onto the bed as he stood up reluctantly. So much for escaping, he thought. He headed to his closet, rifling through shirts, trying to find something that would meet his father's standards. The idea of dressing up, of shaking hands and pretending to care about the people Nathaniel had charmed into his life, made his skin crawl. But he knew there was no way out of it. Not today. As he yanked a shirt off the hanger, he couldn't help but think about Laura again. A quiet afternoon with her somewhere anywhere, but here was what he really wanted. But that wasn't in the cards. Today wasn't about him. It never was. With a resigned sigh, Jonathan began to get dressed, but then an idea sparked. If he was going to survive this event, why not bring Laura along? She was the only person who could make the day bearable, maybe even enjoyable. Suddenly, the task of getting ready didn't seem so tedious. He actually wanted to look his best now. He rummaged through his closet, pulling out one of his nicer shirts, something he knew would meet his father's standards but also catch everyone's attention. As he buttoned up, he glanced at his phone again. If she agreed to come, she'd be the perfect distraction from all the family chaos. Plus, having her by his side would take the edge off the inevitable comparisons between him and Nathaniel. "Yeah, this'll work," he muttered to himself, straightening his collar and smoothing his hair. With one last glance in the mirror, Jonathan grabbed his phone. Wouldn't feel so heavy after all. He was going to invite Laura, and this time, maybe the dash-in, and made his way toward Laura's. The idea of having her with Jonathan felt somehow excited as he stepped out of the house today, made everything feel lighter. But when he arrived, something was off. The gate was closed and the house was eerily quiet. He glanced up to where her bedroom window was, but the curtains were drawn. The whole place looked deserted. His brows furrowed in confusion. Laura's family often traveled for business, but she usually told him if they were going somewhere. And so he pulled out his phone, checking for a message. But there was nothing, no explanation, no heads up, not even a casual text like she usually sent. That nagging feeling of uncertainty started creeping in. She had never just disappeared like this before. Jonathan lingered at the gate for a moment, feeling unsettled. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something wasn't right. Just as he was about to call her, his family's voices carried from behind him. "Jonathan, come on, we're going to be late," Tabitha called out, waving her hand dramatically from the gate. "The party's about to start." He glanced back toward Laura's empty house. A part of him still wanted to reach out, to figure out why she hadn't told him anything. But his family was waiting, and there was no time to linger. With a frustrated sigh, he shoved the phone back into his pocket. "Yeah, I'm coming," he muttered, turning on his heel and walking back toward his family. Meanwhile, at the venue, Nathaniel adjusted his suit one last time as a confident smile tugged at his lips when the Levine family arrived. The room seemed to quiet, at least in his mind, when his eyes landed on Laura. She was stunning in her elegant white dress as the soft fabric hugged her figure and her flawless skin glowed under the chandeliers. His heart skipped a beat, then another, as if it were about to leap out of his chest. "Laura," he breathed out of relief as gratitude washed over him. In that moment, he silently thanked the heavens for giving him the chance to be with her. She was more than he ever thought he deserved. Then, Laura's soft giggle brought him back to reality. "Nathaniel," she said, her voice light and teasing as she approached him, clearly enjoying his reaction. Nathaniel quickly composed himself and turned to shake hands with Laura's parents, his movements respectful, his gratitude clear. "Thank you," he said earnestly, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Thank you for giving me the privilege of having Laura's hand in marriage. I promise you, sir, I'll spend my life making her happy." Mr. Levine chuckled, clearly amused by Nathaniel's formality. He placed a firm hand on Nathaniel's shoulder and smiled warmly. "We know you will, son. You don't have to convince us," he said, his voice light-hearted but sincere. "Welcome to the family, Nathaniel," Mrs. Levine added with a kind smile. "Thank you, Mom," Nathaniel replied, still feeling the weight of the moment. Mrs. Levine waved a hand in the air, shaking her head with a soft laugh. "Oh hush, no more of that. Call me, Mother," she insisted in her affectionate tone. Nathaniel smiled as he felt a rush of warmth. "Thank you, Mother," he said, the word feeling strange but comforting on his lips, as if this was exactly where he was supposed to be. The end. And that's a wrap on today's reading here at Booked for Drama. If you felt anything, rage, swoon, secondhand heartbreak, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow drama lovers. If you have any requests, drop them in the comments. Until next time, keep reading, and keep the drama on the page.